Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to Three's In this fine Sunday afternoon. A little bit blowy here in Anna, Ohio, but seems to be that way all the time. I don't know what the hell it is. We're 40 miles north of Dayton, just about that area. And it's like Augustus McCrae might have said, God, Captain, I don't know why those two bozos drove all the way to North Carolina to fly that airplane. They could have driven 40 miles up the road and had the same amount of wind, if not more. At any rate, the way I contend with this wind tunnel I live in is I continually remind myself if it is that much windy here, someplace east of here must really suck. That's about the way I deal with it. It's sick, I know. At any rate, I was out back working and I got to thinking about a character we had in our pilot training class, John M. We'll leave it at that. He was a good guy. I liked him. But, they say that we all march to the beat of a different drummer. Well, John was in tune with the xylophone player. He just kind of went his own way and nothing really bothered him. He showed up at Randolph in a Volkswagen bus, all decked out with various colors and so forth. And he soon became our resident hippie, go figure. At any rate, John came to our class as a F-105 guard baby. He knew he was going back to F-105 in New Jersey at McGuire. God, I'll tell you what. I would have loved to have had that assignment, and John could have cared less. He went through the motions of pilot training. He graduated, did fine, but I never saw him putting out much of an effort. He did what he had to do to get through, and he got through. Now, where the story picks up and gets interesting is I was assigned to McGuire and C-141s, and after we graduated in April of 1971, we all headed up to Spokane to survival school. And then from Spokane, we went to our various units for training, follow-on training. Myself, I went to Altus for C-141 school. And that meant I showed up at McGuire sometime around July, early to mid-July. So that gives you a little bit of background here. Didn't see John. He was on the other side of the base in the 105 unit. But one afternoon there in base housing, doorbell rang, went to the door, and there stood John. Hey, John, how's it going? I think this would have been late September, early October time frame in 1971. He came in, sat down, and I asked the first stupid question, would you like a beer? Yeah. So I come back, what have you been up to? And he says, Holliker, he says, you would not believe it. I said, well, go ahead and try me. He said, when I showed up to the unit, back in whenever it was, in the spring, he said, walked in the commander's office, introduced myself, and told the commander that I just didn't think I could fly F-105s in combat. I really didn't want to hurt anybody. And he said he totally overreacted. He stood up, he said, he reached out and grabbed me by my flight suit and pulled me across his desk, and he says, look, you little asshole. He says, I'm just tired of you guys. I've had enough. And he said, I didn't know they could do that. And I wasn't going to ask him either. He said, what I want you to do is take 3 days off. You got them. Now they're off the books. And he says, I want you to drive up to the city, New York City, and I want you to find the most vile, vicious, nastiest, sneakiest New York lawyer you can find. And I want you to ask that son of a bitch what I can do to you if you refuse to fly with us. And then come back in 3 days and tell me what you're going to do. And then he just kind of pushed me back across his desk. He said, well, that got my attention for sure. So he said, I took his advice and I drove up to the city. And he said, I had some contacts up there and I found this lawyer and went in and presented my case to him. And he told me what the commander could do under the UCMJ. And he said the choice became obvious at that time. He says, I drove back to McGuire a day early, walked in his office, saluted smartly, and said, sir, Lieutenant John Schmuckenfuss reporting for duty, and I'll be delighted to fly. So he says, what happened next was really interesting. He said, they wanted to keep me busy because they were afraid if they just let me alone to my own self too much, they weren't sure what I was going to do. And he says, I wasn't sure myself. So he said, after a few days, they got me a F-100 training slot out in Tucson. So I packed my bags and headed out to Tucson for a few months and went through F-100 school, got fully qualified there. He's a lot of fun to fly. He said, then I came back to the unit, and then they said, well, now that you're checked out in F-100s, we can't use you, but there's a slot open down in Baltimore to fly A-37s. Why don't you go down there for a couple months or whatever it was? So he says, I changed my underwear and headed back down to Baltimore, and they got me checked out in the A-37. And then by that time, he said, came back, they had a slot for me in F-105 school. So I went out to McConnell and checked out in the F-105. Oh my God, I mean, he stumbled into a dream situation, at least for a guy like me. I would have loved to have flown all three of those airplanes. I thought any one of those three would have just been a hoot. But to his credit, John served faithfully for the next 4 years or whatever his commitment was, and then I never heard anything more of him after I left McGuire. Until 50 years later, 2020. Well, no, that's not right. I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to do the math. But anyway, we had a reunion in San Antonio. There were about 9 or 10 of us that showed up, and John was one of them. And God bless him, we laughed about that story again, and he got out afterwards and went into real estate and did very well for himself. But man, I'll tell you what, I held a kind of a resentment toward him for many years because he had that slot I would have died for. But in retrospect, had I gotten it, I probably would have died. But anyway, I'm kind of glad I got the C-141 so I could sit here and tell you stories. That's just another one of them. As we finished our beers, I asked John, I said, where are you staying these days? And he says, oh, I'm staying in the first floor of an abandoned barracks over there on the other side of the base. And I said, yeah, that would be you. So God bless him. What a story he could tell if he showed up on the channel. That being said, this is Bobo. Hope everybody's having a great day. I certainly am. It's good to see everybody. Base gear. Stop.